Israel, welcome to the Archispeak podcast. It's great to see you.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So Cormac is not in on this yet, but I thought it would be fun to do. We're going to talk about architecture, believe it or not.
Ooh.
And the reason that Israel is on the show, Israel and I, we used to work together. Israel is at the firm that I used to be at. And how long have you been there now, Israel? I mean, you may not want to say.
22 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know it's been a long time, but okay, more than half of that time has been not entirely, but been spent on the project that we're going to talk about today.
Yes. More than half of my HMC career has been on this project.
That's
interesting,
insane, right? And okay, so
just
Cormac,
having a conversation similar to that.
I would love, Cormac, for you to pull out your crystal ball right now. Okay, you kind of know, what kind of projects HMC does. I would love you to guess what kind of project Israel has been working on for since 2011. Since
2011. Okay. Could I do some 20 questions here to kind of like zero in on it a bit?
Okay. First, I want you to just go cold guess, and then you can play 20 questions. So let's just see if you can.
Cold guess. I mean,
yeah.
I would love to say something as ridiculous as an elementary school.
Wow, pretty darn good.
Yeah.
I like that you think it's ridiculous. And by the way, look I'm pulling out the Archispeak mug here. This podcast, Israel, has been going on slightly longer than your project.
Wow.
Just barely.
Yeah. So
why are you making those noises?
You.
Why are you making those noises?
Because sadly, I can feel the pain that the smile is hiding.
No.
Oh, the realities of architecture, right here.
Which I think it was one of your recent pod. You talked about those projects that are just so exhausting and tiring and stressful. But at the end of it, you realized how incredible of a project it was and how much you miss it. So I was listening to one of your podcasts, and that just was incredibly relevant to this one.
We were trying to explain to one of our newer hires about a project that we're working on right now. And I was actually corrected. The project started in 2015 and I think 2015. Yeah, 2015. And it will finish up third quarter of 2026. So not as long as yours, but it is one of those like long process. And they're like, how do you stay sane on a project like that? So let me ask you, how do you stay sane on a project like that?
Well, for me, running. Honestly,
running from the project?
Running from the project. That is one of the things that I'm very passionate about is running. My fitness, health and fitness has always been a big part of my life. You know, I've done over 28 marathons, 2 full Ironmans, half a dozen or more half Ironmans, and you name it, I've done it. And really, after a stressful day of work, I go and I run. And even at work, this is before pre-pandemic and before I spent more time off-site, I would actually spend my lunch at HMC running. We had a gym there, and that's what I did. I ran. That was my therapy, and that's the only way that I could get through some of those incredibly difficult days. But it was definitely my fitness.
Yeah, great answer. And I'm glad you brought up the Ironman thing and the marathon thing, because that's an incredible accomplishment. And if you had to guess, like, I don't want to ask how many miles you've run. I don't know if you know that, but how many pairs of shoes have you gone through?
Oh my gosh. I go through, every pair of shoes is 200 miles, and I can get 200 miles during peak training. Every 3 months, 2 to 3 months, I'm constantly going through shoes. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I do it is to prevent injury. I know that I have a lot of friends that they don't want to spend the money because they're not cheap. So they just, until they're falling apart, that's when they get rid of them. But as soon as I feel anything, whether it's a little something in my knee, something in my lower back, something in my calf, it's like, okay, time to throw out those shoes and get a new pair.
Wow.
So, but yeah, I go through a lot of shoes. Yeah.
I have a friend who was in architecture and didn't seem as passionate about it as we clearly are, at least just in the fact that like it was always kind of like wearing him down. And he was a runner.
Mm-hmm.
He was a cross country runner and everything else, and ran in college, and then ended up quitting it and becoming an elite runner.
Wow.
Where now he's ranked in his age group in now 40s and like in the top, whatever, like 20. And he always, yes, I should continue to keep running, but I'm running from like ice cream trucks and things like that. No, but that's one of his things is he goes through shoes like nobody's business. I mean, He's always posting. It's just like, welcome the new pair. It's just like welcoming a new baby. It's like welcoming the new pair. And it literally is probably like one every 2 months at best, not more.
And those runners, elite runners, are not wearing those shoes. Are expensive.
Yes.
Those are really expensive shoes. I won't spend that unless I'm doing a race where I'm trying to qualify for something, but I'm not there anymore. That was back 10 years ago.
And I watched him on just a local 10K, and he and the front runners, they sprinted the entire 10K. I'm like, how do you maintain that level of intensity for that long? It just dumbfounded me.
It's pretty amazing. I think about my best marathon that I ever ran was actually my fastest was Ojai, but I don't count that as my fastest, even though I had the better time. My best that I'm most proud of is the LA Marathon because it is a challenging course. It isn't flat. They kind of they market it as a downhill run. But it really isn't. There are so many hills and so many climbs that it's really challenging. But that's one of my best times. And it was my time was 3:06. So my miles were about 7:06, 7:07 pace.
Wow.
Which
wow.
I mean, I was just incredibly excited to get that. I was really hoping to try to get a sub 3 hour marathon, but I never got there. It's a whole different level.
Just the fact that you can say you ran a marathon in general, but as many as you have, and the Ironman and the half marathons and the half Ironman and stuff like that. It was funny that I was just having this conversation about somebody saying, you do a lot of things. You teach, you podcast, you do this, and then you have the full-time job, and you just all the training that you're doing, you just put me to shame. You just best me.
What's interesting about the mileage, although I don't know how many miles I've run overall, I easily hit 2,000 a year. But I was a while ago.
Yeah.
But the last couple years, specifically because of this Beverly Hills project, I spent a lot of time in Beverly Hills, and I actually was living in Beverly Hills most of the week, because I was required to be on site. And so there are more miles on my feet than there were on my vehicle in the last couple of years, in the last 2-3 years. Garmin tracks everything, right? I track all my mileage, my walking, my running, and then the odometer on my truck. I put in more miles on my Garmin than I did in my vehicle.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty insane.
So speaking of marathons, right? Like look at that segue.
That was my segue, dang it.
I mean, and the demands of a project that goes on for this long. And maybe you can just give kind of an overview of this project. I will preempt that and say I looked back through some of my old design files because I was on the team that pursued this client, and it was like you've already alluded to Beverly Hills. So it's the school district in Beverly Hills for K-12, and I believe this was a K-8, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. They have quite a few K-8s, and the whole district had to be modernized at some point. And so we didn't know what we were going after. Everybody was going after something who was in the pool, basically to be in the pool of architects. And I looked at the dates on the files, and it was January of 2011 that we presented to the school district, which then precipitated the project that Israel's going to tell us about now. So jump in.
So the project did start off as a K-8, but after DSA approval, the district went through an educational reconfiguration and it became a K-5. So it did become an elementary school. So it didn't start off as one, but it became one after DSA approval. But it's essentially 118,000 square feet of buildings. It's 5 building units that are all connected. So it's almost like one massive building. And with part of the component being a major historic rehabilitation, seismic retrofit, and as well as a modernization. So there was multiple things going on at the same time, and each one could have been a standalone. It's a beautiful 1927 revival, at least the historic components are a Spanish revival building designed by Austin, Ashley, and Hudson. Beautiful, gorgeous, ornate facade with a belfry and beautiful stone facades, tile. I mean, it's just a stunning building. So 3 of the buildings are identified as historic buildings, and 2 were built in the 60s and are not, but they're all interconnected. But we pretty much, as part of the modernization, we have touched every square inch of that building, every square inch of the exterior, every interior, and including the entire exterior. Every surface has been touched. There's really nothing that we didn't touch as part of this modernization. But it didn't start off as that. When Evan first worked on it, I mean, it was just, the budget was only $22 million back then. And the major concern back then was the seismic retrofit portion of it. That's what triggered the modernization, and as well as aging infrastructure. Just the systems were just very antiquated and old. And also the reality that they really hadn't done any major improvements to the interior of those classrooms in a long time. And they were in dire need, but we had to do a lot with $22 million, and it just wasn't working. It just wasn't enough money.
I love how states or even like local jurisdictions love to stretch that dollar as far as you can go. And when it's faced with the reality of they're asking for the 10 pounds of program that, and fit it into that 5 pounds bag, and you're just like, it's just not working.
No,
it's just, you're not able to get all of that in there. But yet then at the end of the day, when the budget comes by and they're like, so yeah, what are we going to get cut off of this one? Yeah. It sounds like you went
well, that's how it started. That was definitely the conversation that was going on back then. And I think just to kind of set the stage of where we started, it was like all hands on deck, full team on site with, remember 2011. Laptops and Revit.
Early Revit.
Revit 2010 or 2009, where all the buttons went down the side. There wasn't even a ribbon yet. And actually did an as-built model of the campus with, 5 or 6 or 10 people, and really crawling through every nook and cranny and exploring. I mean, it was very Atlas Obscura, Cormac. If you go up into the bell tower, it was filled with graffiti on the inside, and everybody had tagged it and signed their name. Like the students had all snuck up there whenever they could and signed their name as like part of the school, right? And nice. There was just a lot of really cool little things to find out about this place as you kind of as we explored through it, but also modeled it so that we could do the kind of feasibility study that was really needed, that hadn't, because nobody truly knew what existed there, right? They didn't know the true state of what everything was in. And I remember even like crawling through the attic of the auditorium, right? Like up into like the performing arts kind of room space, and crawling through this trust space, and just, it was just insanely kind of haunted feeling up there. It was just, it really had not much had been done in quite a very long time. So, I mean, that just kind of gives you a little bit of the picture of where we started with this project. And then we ultimately kind of just established what we thought was going to be the feasibility, like what was going to happen. And we presented that, I think, in like October of that year. And And nobody foresaw this project taking 13 years to complete. Nobody. But at the same time, nobody knew where it was going, because clearly kind of the scope and the budget were not well defined, but also you could tell they were going to be at odds for quite a while.
So I've worked on projects that sound almost identical in the fact that they've got historic components. You've got later additions that aren't really part of like the contributing factor to the historic fabric, but are things that you need to do either a modernization or a revitalization to, and then selective additions and things like that. And in those projects, I will definitely say take a while. And one that I had that was had to conform to the Department of Interior historic standards because it was in downtown historic Annapolis, Maryland, which is the state capital. It took it was a 7-year project. And this is kind of a loaded question because I sort of know the answer, but I'm also kind of curious, why 13 years?
Politics and budget. No,
yeah,
honestly,
I sort of knew that was where you were going, but
it's, again, it was very difficult for the board to go back to the community and say, we need another bond and we need more money to really do this right. And the board was divided. Some of them knew what needed to be done, and others just, they didn't want to go back and try to issue another bond. So it was challenging because of that. And so, they did increase the budget throughout the years. So it went from 22 million, then it went up to 42 million, then it went up to 50 plus, but it still wasn't enough. One of the things that was happening was one of the other campuses started the whole modernization process. It was Horace Mann. It was one of the other K-8s. That was kind of like the guinea pig. They started off first.
That was the first one. That was the one that we did the design kind of like that was part of the presentation, was showing the design for that campus and what we would do there. So I can totally see why they did that one first, because everybody kind of knew it and that one had a head start.
Right. So they started construction, and then of course with 100-year-old buildings, as soon as you start demolition, what happens?
You find stuff.
You find things, unforeseen conditions. Yeah, exactly. And that's what they were discovering, is all these issues. And the program manager at that time was really trying to stick to the budget as much as they could. And so they were really working hard to stay within budget, even though things kept coming up and they just had to spend more money. And at the end of the project, they did what they could. And then they realized, we really should have spent the money to do all these other things, because then those other things became issues. Like, for example, the roof. There are certain parts, I'm not exactly sure, but it had something to do with the roofing. They had a major rain event, and all of a sudden roofs were leaking, and all the work they'd done on the interiors was starting to get damaged. So I think that really opened up the eyes of the board and other individuals that it's like, if we're going to do this, we got to do it right. But again, there were a lot of other politics involved, and I mean, the change in leadership on the district side was constant, and so it was hard to get everybody on board and get everybody up to speed. And then finally, in 2018 or 2017, 2018, a new program manager came in and really just said, if you guys want to do this right, this is what you have to do, and this is the money you need to spend. And that's when things really started going. And that's where we were able to finally get into construction and finally try to get this done.
How long was that school closed down during this process?
Oh, I believe they closed down, I might be off by a year, so in 2018, was it 2018 or 2017 was the last year that students were in that building. And so, almost 7, no students, 6 to 7 years that students weren't there. Originally, the original plan was to have a phased program. And so interim housing was everywhere. And when we think about what we had to go through without students on campus, that would have just been absolutely impossible. There's just no way that would have worked. But one of the things that what was happening in the district was they are experiencing declining enrollment. And so one of the campuses was almost vacant. So they were able to take all the El Rodeo students and take them over to Hawthorne Elementary, which is down the road. And again, with the restructuring going from K-8 to K-5, they now had some better efficiencies with not duplication of so much staff and needing different campuses. So it helped consolidate some of the programs they had. So it helped that being able to shift all the students from El Rodeo onto another campus because of that. So it did help.
What was the size of the student body there?
So at El Rodeo, at that time, it was about between 700 and 800.
And you said it was 100,000 square feet?
It's 118,000 square feet of building,
000.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've worked through numerous like phase while occupied, and so just the nightmare of going through all of that and the multiple different like phasing plans and life safety plans that you have to do to get that project to work is kind of insane. But a lot of times for schools that big and with a large student population, you almost have to convince them you've got to get the kids out of there and do something else because it just becomes unruly.
And it's a small site. It's acres, less than 6.5 acres. So it's a really tight site. So even with the construction crews, it was tight. I mean, there was very little room to lay down areas and all the trailers that people needed and our construction trailers as well. We ended up getting moved around from place to place just because we needed, now we need to, we're moving into this phase, get out, move on to the other side of the campus. And eventually we ended up occupying part of the administration building towards the tail end of it.
So when the school actually shut down fully, when then did construction begin? So was there a gap there before construction started, or did it start right then?
Well, I believe there was a little bit of a gap because we were going through DSA approval, but in 2019 is when we officially kicked off. So I think I think students were there up until the 2018-2019 school year, and then in 2019 it shut down, and then we started construction in that August.
And if I can't remember when, like the actual design phase, let's not call it like conceptual design even part of this conversation. Like when did schematic design start, like year wise? Like I'm just kind of tracking this 2011 to 2018. That's a 7-year design phase, right? I mean, and there was all kinds of roller coaster going on during that time with the politics and with the money and with all this stuff. But like, how long was it actually in SDDDC, like actually in the model?
And before you answer that, so I want to add on how many design, redesign, redesign, and things like that happen, because I can see, because I've lived those kind of like, it's taken you how long to design it? And it usually is the design, redesign, redesign. You know how it's like when you look at those files, it's just like final point two, final point, final.
Really this time.
Exactly. Yes. So, sorry.
So the date that's like right in front of me, it's final schematic design package was June of 2014. So June of 2014 was when the final
when
schematic,
they approved
when they approved
the
schematic
and
design.
Then it actually went into
DD.
So let me ask you, the final approved schematic design, what was made it
what
to?
They did.
Basically, your bid set.
No, not at all.
Not at all. Yeah.
No. So what happened was that after the schematic design was approved, then the discussion started coming in from the district side. The interim district facilities director at that time wanted to explore the seismic mitigation program through DSA, the SMPR program. And so, that was an opportunity to go after additional funding, because there was the seismic retrofit component. Then they thought, well, let's pursue those funds. And so there was a shift. So we shifted gears at that point, and then we really started to look at the project from a seismic perspective and looking at all the requirements for this procedure through DSA. And so that really triggered even more changes, because all going into a mandatory seismic retrofit, there were very specific things that you needed to do to the building, right? And each one of those impacted the historic parts of the building. And so that budget, that's when it really started increasing, because now you were following this mandatory program. And so that really changed the project completely.
I'm trying to think back, Israel, about the process and just kind of thinking about all the materials that we just continued to provide until schematic designs were actually approved. I mean, it was volumes and volumes and volumes of work, right? And the reason I'm kind of, it's crazy that it took this long. And then you've talked about politics, and we talked about all the design changes, and we've talked about once you kind of crack the walls open, it's like, oh, there's stuff in there. There's all these things. And I think that it's just important to kind of keep in mind. And you've mentioned DSA. I think a lot of our listeners probably don't even know what DSA is, right? It might be good to define what DSA is and kind of explain how it works in California with schools. But there's just a lot of moving parts here. And I don't think anybody goes to school thinking that any of this is part of quote unquote architecture, right? Like architecture is just designing buildings, right? And I bring it up as like all these moving parts because like you're actually involved and you've been personally involved in a lot of that for so long as the project manager of the project and just being the orchestrator of everything that has to happen internally with the internal design team, but also externally with all these other pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah.
Let's take a short break from the conversation to tell you about today's sponsor. Not long ago, we started hearing about a company helping firm owners build effective remote teams. When we looked into it, we found World Teams, a company that specializes in helping smaller architectural practices set up skilled and reliable remote teams. What struck us most was how they're addressing a critical challenge for small architecture firms, the need to scale teams up or down as workloads change. It's a great way to handle busier periods without the overhead of permanent hires, keeping labor costs manageable. World Teams is designed with this flexibility in mind. They're a lean, high-impact company that connects architecture firms with talented remote professionals, saving the hassle of endless resumes and interviews. Plus, they operate within your time zone and prioritize near-native English speakers, ensuring clear and effective communication with your team members. Their flexible contracts allow firms to adjust team sizes as project demands change. You'll be connected directly with these skilled professionals, building trust and collaboration while reducing operating costs without sacrificing quality, a win for any practice looking to expand intelligently. If you want to hear more about World Teams and how they can help your firm grow, visit worldteams.com/hire-top-talent. That's worldteams.com/hire-top-talent, or you can click the link that we've provided in the show notes. So once again, follow the link in the show notes or go to worldteams.com/hire-top-talent. Thank you to World Teams for helping make this episode possible. And now, back to the conversation.
DSA was very challenging. So for those of you that don't know what DSA is, it's the division of the state architect, and it's the state agency that all school projects and community college districts go through for plan approval for schools. And so we initially submitted into DSA in 2016, early 2016 was our first submittal. And we were going in as a seismic mitigation project. And so we were following that process, which is different from a regular submittal. There's like these very specific phases that you have to follow. And you submit a phase, you submit your project, you get a concurrence or acceptance letter from DSA, and then you move on to the next phase. And then you keep doing that until you actually get to what is the typical traditional DSA submittal for any school project. So you have to go through all these phases before you go into the actual DSA submittal. And then after that, then you go through OPSC for the funding portion of it. So we started off that way. And we submitted, and we were going through the plan review process, and you have your access, you have your structural reviewer, and your fire life safety. So you have your 3 disciplines. And so we're going through the process. You wait for comments, you get the comments back, like every plan check, and you pick them up. Well, what happened for this project was there was a change in the structural reviewer. So the structural reviewer that reviewed all the previous initial phases or tiers of the S&P program, the one that says, I agree with your direction, I agree with your approach, move forward. That reviewer was changed to somebody completely different. And so again, we've already gone through this process and we've gotten concurrence letters from the state saying like, yeah, we're in agreement in your approach, go. We've submitted the project, we've designed the entire project, and it goes to a new reviewer, and this reviewer comes back and says, time out, I disagree. I don't agree with this. So we literally had to pull back and redesign our structural systems because this reviewer didn't agree with the original concurrence from DSA. So we almost had, for the most part, a lot of the modernization components and some of the historic parts that we did stayed the same. But structurally, there were a lot of changes. So we had to go back and start over again. So that was our second submittal. So now we're going through this, getting our waiting for comments for this next round. And we're dealing with our reviewers. And we had some of those most challenging reviewers that you could get at DSA. Then this is taking so long that now this funding component that was out there through the state was disappearing. And we were seeing those dollars just dwindle. And we were like, the district was just wanting this process to go quicker because you had to get in line for this money. And then we realized, oh, we're not going to get it. So we need to pull out. So,
yeah. So when projects take that long, you sort of are like, you get kicked to the side. You're just like, you got to go back to the line and get there with your plate out. Say,
you got to be done. You got to be done to get in line.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
So we had to pull out and go, okay, if there is no more funding to go through this mandatory seismic program, why are we going to spend all this money to do this when we're not going to get anything back? So we had to basically pull it back and start again structurally and say, okay, we're not doing it as a mandatory program. We're now doing it as a voluntary. And what does that mean? So that was our third resubmittal. And so that was our third submission. And we finally got it through DSA approval. And then after DSA approval, the district made the educational program change, went from a K8 to a K5. So once we got DSA approved, it's almost like we had to start over again.
Yeah.
And they increased, there was a lot more scope that was introduced into the project. So there were 4 major revisions once we started the whole DSA approval process.
So let me ask you this, because the length of the design process, not just the 13 years of the overall project, but the design process took so long, how many times, because this was prior to submitting for permit, how many times did the building codes change that you had to either potentially redo everything?
We actually were really lucky on that. We started off under the 2013 CBC and we remained as the 2013 CBC.
Wow.
How's that even possible?
DSA did not make us.
They didn't require
us to go to the current code.
That's incredible.
Interesting.
But I will say that there were a lot of things that we did that met current code anyway. But still, it was approved under the 2013 CBC, even though it was DSA approved in 2019.
Yeah, wow. I've been caught a couple of times in the transition between codes, and they're like, "Well, you haven't submitted for permit yet, so guess what? We've now adopted IBC 2015, and so you've got to do that one now." You're like, and then you do the whole assessment of like, all right, what has changed? What is applicable still? And then go through that whole process, which you know what I'm talking about.
I have at least 3 more topics that I still want to get to here. So
I have one.
And I'm sure you do. So you go first. And I'm going to try to keep this moving so that this isn't a 4-hour podcast. But there's a lot to talk about still.
So one of the things, and I've experienced this, so I'm just kind of curious about what you've experienced, the historic building, you started opening it up. What kind of fun skeletons did you find? Because I'd love to trade war stories about like, ooh, what's inside your bag of tricks?
The immediate one was as soon as the plaster came off those walls and some of those walls, the hollow clay tile.
Yes. Yeah.
And,
so this was
seismic
what
tile.
your vintage...
That's called seismic tile. It's great. It's a fantastic building material.
We had hollow clay terracotta tiles as one of the load bearing. And so they moved all of the lockers out, and this was in one of the 1930 editions. And so they moved all of the lockers out of the way, and they had all of this glazed tile down the corridor that they started to peel away. Well, they peeled away a little bit, and I'm talking about like 70 linear feet of all of this glazed tile came off. But what it did was it took like if you got the block, it took half of the block with it. And so essentially when the 70 linear feet fell, you had half a block for 70 linear feet of a bearing wall.
Oh, wow.
Good luck with that.
There was. And now looking back at the as-built or the record drawings that we had, again, they were really weak. I mean, they were just very limited. Now we understand why those walls look like they did in plan, because at first there really wasn't a legend. And so we really didn't understand what we were looking at other than, well, it looks like a concrete wall, cast in place concrete. Okay. But as soon as the plaster came off and we saw that they were hollow clay tiles, now we understood, oh, that actually was a little different. That's where all the hollow clay tile was. And so we basically had to remove every square inch of hollow clay tile and replace it with metal stud framing everywhere. So a lot of the walls that we didn't think we were going to have to rebuild, we had to rebuild throughout the interior of those buildings.
The unforeseen conditions of existing buildings when you're trying to do a renovation, and especially when it gets into historic, it's just amazing where a lot of your money in the budget goes.
Oh, we spent a lot of energy in the auditorium, a lot of time and energy. Evan, if you're ever down here, man, you need to see this auditorium. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous.
I saw
it's
your
stunning.
Photographs. It's absolutely incredible with that lowering.
Oh, that line shaft.
It's
it's so awesome. It's really, honestly, it's user friendly. I learned how to use it, and I was able to. So in the video that we did for that project, that was me navigating that and nice. Bringing it up, taking it down, changing the lights. It was pretty amazing.
That's cool.
But in that auditorium, because of the historic component, one of the character defining features of the auditorium was actually the floor slope, right? So, and it wasn't accessible, or parts of it weren't accessible, but per DSA, we had to make it accessible. So we were really being strategic as to how much of that floor slope we impacted by putting in a little bit of a ramp to just make it compliant. And so we spent so much energy designing this thing and making and trying to preserve as much of that original floor slope. So then they start looking underneath the slab. We were underneath the stage, and we were running some utilities underneath it, and we were able to crawl under it, and we saw that it wasn't being supported. So it was supposed to be a slab on grade condition. And our structural engineer and I were under there, or several of us were under there, and she basically said, this can't happen. And so we literally we ended up demoing that for the entire floor, redesigning it, report it, and put the proper, because even the supports that slab had, they weren't there. There were some that weren't even attached. And it was, and this is during construction. And we had to hurry up and we were trying to meet our schedule. And in the midst of it, we had to basically redesign it and re-pour the whole thing. And so although that effort that we spent trying to preserve as much of that character defining floor slab, we had to demo it and start over again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was, so, and that happened a lot throughout the building.
Well, you talked about that space, and I'm curious, like what maybe that space is the answer, but like, what are you most proud of with this project? Is it just trying not to think of the whole thing in total. I know this is like an incredible feat of architecture to have done this whole thing and to touch everything. There's some piece of it though that really stands out to you.
That ceiling in the auditorium and the dome. The dome is the one that kept me up at night a lot. It's how do you document that, and knowing that whole thing needs to come down and you need to rebuild it and make it look exactly like it was before. How do you do it? I mean, we were trying to
paint a picture of what that dome looks like so people can kind of get a picture in their brain. Because if you say dome, it's like you could mean like some giant like 100-foot dome, or you could mean what you're actually going to say.
I wish I could show you pictures, but I honestly, I don't even know the dimensions of the diameter of the dome. But it's this beautiful dome that sits on top of this belfry. It's this octagonal tower. And so that we have this dome that's just covered in tile. And it has these 8 segments of very specific geometry and colors of tile that needed to be replicated. So the reason that dome had to come down is because the interior, the structure that was supporting it was rusting and falling apart. And we were trying to figure out, is there any way to encapsulate it so it can stop so it doesn't fall apart and we don't have any more, it doesn't deteriorate, and just structurally, our structural engineer is like, no, that has to come down. So because of that, everything on top of it had to come down because there wasn't any way to actually support the plaster above it and all the tile that was on top of it, plus the cupola that was sitting on top of the dome. And so trying to figure out what the actual construction was and what that thickness of that assembly was that rested on that octagon, and just getting the right radius for the curvature of the dome, and just all those things, and just the number of tiles, the size of tiles, the spacing of the tile. It's just like, how do you do it? Like, how do you actually do it? So one of the things that we had was early on during the non-destructive testing portion of the investigations that we were doing, the district hired this company called GB Geotechnical USA Inc. And so they did a lot of non-destructive testing for us. They did photography, they did scanning, they did thermal imaging. They did a lot of cool things that I've never done before in my life, and now I can say that I've done it. But one of the things that they did is they scanned the entire tower, and from a historic perspective, in case something happened, right? If there was this major earthquake and it all collapsed, at least we have record of what that was. Not that we were going to build off of it, but at least you have that record. So one of the things that we were able to do is we were able to take that model, and I don't remember the file format that they gave us. It was a little bit odd because we had a difficult time bringing it into Revit. But we were able to bring it into Revit, and we were able to kind of figure out what the outer radius of the dome was, and we found that it wasn't just center, here's your center point, and it just goes from the center and it goes out. No, actually the radius they were kind of crisscross like this. And so it was really weird. And so when we were doing the drawings, it just looked wrong. It's like, this isn't right. But taking the scan and bringing in and overlaying it with our Revit model and our even just doing like 2D sections, I mean, that's the radius, and that was our center point that it was telling us. But then when we added the cupola on top of it, it made sense. It really did look just like the original dome, but without it, it just looked wrong. It just didn't look like that perfect spherical shape.
So you were talking about I know from experience that a lot of times when you're doing historic buildings from the 20s on back, that the existing drawings aren't really reliable or non-existent or whatever. And I always found kind of excitement in a way in almost trying to play detective, play sleuth, and figure out how things go together when you don't have all of that information. And especially if you're doing non-destructive testing and surveying, because, you really don't know some of the things that are, hiding behind the walls when you're going through that whole process. And just kind of curious from like, what are some of the fun things that like you were doing to kind of almost learn how things were done back then so that you can do them now in modern ways?
So the support at the dome, that was one of the things that we were unsure how it actually was supported. One of the things that was missing is the infamous detail sheet number 8. So this was the detail. This was the detail sheet that was for the dome and specifically for the stone. That was the challenging part, is trying to figure out, well, how is this all being supported and anchored? And now for the dome, we did have an opportunity to climb into it and kind of see what was happening, but a lot of it was covered in plaster, so you couldn't actually see the connection. And so again, as part of the demolition and the removal of some of the plaster, it revealed that the details that were there didn't really apply, and some of the connections that were there actually didn't exist. So even though that octagon that was there, that should have remained in place, once we removed that dome off of it, that whole octagon was also impacted. So all that support base also had to be removed and taken off, just because it needed the dome in order to keep it in place. So then we had to go back and redesign our structure and figure out how to, one, extend our steel to go all the way down to the actual cast in place concrete portion of the substrate of the tower, and then go outward and try to figure out, okay, what can we do? Because we can't go beyond this radius of the dome, right? And we have to work with the limitation of the steel that we already have on the inside and the substrate of the tower. So it's like filling in that gap. It's like, okay, how are we going to do it? We only have this much room. And so that was pretty fascinating, trying to figure that out. And my team did a lot of modeling, actually, a lot of modeling in Rhino to try to figure out what all those components needed to be and the thickness. So that was a pretty cool exercise, that we were dependent on technology to be able to do that.
I'm interested from like a professional standpoint now, like focusing on how you grew as an architect throughout this project. So 13 years, like you weren't the same at the end that you were at the beginning, right? So maybe pick a couple things to talk about for your own professional growth that happened maybe because of this project, but throughout this project, obviously you experienced a lot and you had to deal with a lot of balls in the air at the same time and like changing of the guard, as it were, on the district side. And you stayed constant through this whole thing, right? So, I mean, professionally, how did this project impact you?
That I'm loyal to a fault.
It's rare that a project manager would stay on a project that entire time that is that long.
I wasn't actually supposed to be doing the CA, but the program manager at that time felt strongly that, okay, if there's been one person that's been consistent throughout this entire project, it's been Israel. Israel knows this project. You
knew too much.
I knew.
You know where everything is buried.
We had a meeting initially before we started construction, and we had identified who our site construction administrator was going to be, and it was one of our best senior CA guys. And I was like, okay, this is going to be great. And the district said no. I said, we do not want this person. The person that needs to be out here and needs to be out here full time is Israel. That was rough, because I said to them, hey, this isn't what I do. I'm not a CA guy. Can I do it? Yeah, I've done it before on other projects, but that's not my expertise. But they really pushed for me to be out there. And I ended up being out there. And so one of the things that I really had to learn was to trust that I knew what I knew, because I always second guess myself. And I think we all do. We always second guess ourselves.
Sure.
And so it's like, am I doing the right thing? Am I going to screw this up? But I did realize that that I did know a lot. I had to give myself more credit than that I was willing to give myself. So I definitely walked away with a little bit more confidence than I had before.
With a project like this, the complexity of a project like this, there are some things that you are taking some assumptions when you're working on them. And especially when you're in CA and now it's proving that those assumptions are right. You're probably sitting there sometimes like fingers crossed, kind of like, please be right, please be right, please be right, kind of like, because I mean, those are some real projects like this. I wish people could at least experience once in their career something like this, because to be quite honest with you, you can learn so much from these complex projects that you're looking at the way things were done historically, that you've seen the process of like all these different construction methods throughout the process. Then you're applying your construction techniques and everything else, and all of the meshing together of all of these different, basically everything that you've learned. And even it sound like you're saying, Israel, is like things that you didn't even know you knew, and now you know them. It's just the complex projects like these, these historic revitalization, renovations, modernizations with additions and things like that. It literally runs the gamut of almost every type of project that you could ever do, all wrapped up in one package.
Yep. I mean, just any project that you go into construction, it's challenging, right? But then add the historic component. Yeah. And then having to go back to all the preservation briefs for this one specific thing. It's like, okay, railing, I need to make this accessible. What am I able to do to still be compliant within historic code, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then but thankfully we were partnered with Historic Resources Group, who is our historic architect. Excellent. And they were incredible. I was constant communication with them. They'd come out to the site, they'd look at things, and it was just a very collaborative experience. But going back to the experience of doing CA, so one of the things that we had the ability to do is, so I did have an additional CA support with me out there, and I also brought out 2 young architects all the time. I made sure they came out at least once a week and spent time, and it took them away from doing design work and doing production work in the office, but they are such better architects for it just because of experiencing all the crazy unforeseen conditions and oh my gosh, now we have to redesign this and do it over again because of whatever reason. And they're just such better architects for it. And so I was very grateful that all 4 of us were able to do we had that experience with El Rodeo.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know of any better educational tool than CA because of the fact that you've drawn it and now you've got to see it through.
That it worked.
And really fail. Understand. It's just like, hey, you remember that line that you drew there? Yeah. Guess what? There it is right there. And then really understanding that. And then they go back and they understand and are more likely to take more care, more concentration to say, okay, am I doing this right? Am I going to get the final output the way that I'm thinking it's going to be? And
the amount of problem solving that happens during the CA process on any project is incredible. A project like this is probably got to be to the power of 10, right? Because you are dealing with so many varying existing conditions and having to blend in with the historic preservation aspect of it. And there's so many different constraints that you're having to deal with. So I imagine that was probably an incredible development time for your team to face those challenges on a daily basis, basically, and have to respond as quickly as possible.
Oh, absolutely. Again, it was incredibly stressful, but now being off of the project, I feel a little empty. It's like, what's next?
So, So let me ask you this. So there's times when it was stressful, times when you probably were bitter, it was like rough and angry, and you're like, man, I can't wait till this is done. Just get me
How do I get off
Let me
this
get
project?
away with it. It's just like, and now that it's done, and then there's this sense of release, you take this step back. And, sometimes we have these kind of like love-hate relationships with our projects, but where are you at in that stage? I mean, are you feeling empty?
He misses it.
I want to go back. No,
It's got Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it's just been such a big part of my life that it's, good and bad. I had in 2018, 2019, I had this weird issue that just, we don't know exactly what happened. I think was based off of stress that my immune system started attacking my optic nerve. So it's sting my vision. So I'm technically visually impaired now. And so it's really changed. My life has changed quite a bit since then, which is one of the reasons that I was living out in Beverly Hills and had a place to stay at during the week because I couldn't drive, because I have driving restrictions, and I have all these restrictions because of my vision. And so it impacted me a lot. And again, I think it happened because of stress, and thankfully because of my fitness. It wasn't a heart attack, but it just happened to be, it just happened to attack my eyes. But again, the experience has just been absolutely incredible. It's been life-changing. It's giving me some, confidence that I didn't have, because I have issues with self-confidence. I've always had that. And but I know that I'm very capable of doing something pretty amazing, just looking at what we accomplished at this campus.
I have a topic that I think goes into like overtime, because I think, Cormac, you would get a kick out of this. So I feel, do you have anything else that you want to ask Israel about this project? Because like what you just said there, Israel, was like this really poetic moment. It was like the answer to more stress is to actually embed you further in the project. But you miss it. Like it actually is this thing you're so proud of. It's absolutely an incredible story.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that one of the lines that I said that I came up with in the interview and the video was that, as architects, we're advocates for our districts, for our clients, for our staff and the students. And I found myself for this particular project that I really became an advocate for the building, because I felt that so many people didn't understand the significance of what this cultural resource is. And is for that community of Beverly Hills. And thankfully, we were able to preserve as much as we could. And the community really did appreciate what we did from that perspective. And so I feel an attachment to the building.
It's got a special place.
Yeah, very special place. Yeah.
I was in the office yesterday, and I was talking to a bunch of senior folks, and they were the only ones left in the office. And I'm like, why are you still here? Just like, well, we got to get this done and all this other stuff. And I'm like, in fact, I was having a conversation back in the Chicago AIA convention with one of your fellow colleagues at HMC. And we were kind of lamenting about just like the young kids and their dedication and all of this other stuff. And we were kind of talking more about just the fact that maybe we have it wrong, that maybe our overworking and all of that other stuff is kind of the wrong way of doing things. And so I'd said, well, it's just like, it's that, that abusive relationship. This is what I said yesterday. I was like, it was that abusive relationship where we love and we love and we love, and it just doesn't love us back the way that we want to be loved. And they were like, yes, exactly that, and it was just like, yeah, I mean, you loved a little too much where it was almost about to take you out.
Mm-hmm.
It's a therapy session right here.
Yeah.
All right. So let's shift gears into overtime, and let's not talk about architecture anymore for a minute, because I want you to explain your backdrop and kind of what this party is.
Okay. Let me do this first. Hold on a second. You'll love this part.
I knew there was going to be special lighting.
Nice.
So you got to look at this part on YouTube, listeners, because it's a very visual spectacle, I dare say.
It is definitely the spectacle.
So explain what's behind you, and then explain this part of your life that's absolutely incredible.
So right now we're sitting in my home office studio / exercise room, but because it's after Halloween, I've actually covered everything behind me because it's a disaster. So our house is a total mess right now. So basically for 2 months, usually we start in after Labor Day weekend is when we start setting up for Halloween. So my partner and I are huge Halloween fans, and not that we're into the gory, scary things. We're just very creative individuals. I call us the perfect A&E team. I'm the architecture, I'm the design, I'm the structure, and my partner is the mechanical, the electrical, the plumbing, the audio visual, the lighting. That's him. And so we're like this perfect combination of just putting something really amazing. So we're big fans of Disney, and so I'm actually a Nightmare Before Christmas fan, and so we've been.
I noticed the mug.
You notice the mug?
I'm a big Tim Burton fan.
So
big Tim Burton fan.
So we started decorating for Halloween and Christmas when we first moved down from the Central Coast, and so we were doing Nightmare Before Christmas, and we were doing that for several years. And my partner was kind of getting tired of it. So when we moved into our home, the home that we're in now, he said, "Hey, can we take a break from Nightmare and do Pirates of the Caribbean?" Because he's a big fan of pirates. And so I said, I kind of joked, but I was actually telling the truth. I said, well, I'm willing to change if I can build a ship. If I can build a pirate ship, then I'm in. And he goes, okay. So it started off with half of a pirate ship and a treasure room and a little bit of decking. And it was pretty spectacular for just a small Halloween display, right? But then we started noticing as people were coming, people were kind of excited about what we were doing. We were having some traffic flow issues because of all the people coming to the door and coming back.
I've driven by this. Yeah. I've driven by this. It's incredible. And I want you to send me some pictures, Israel, so that I can put them in the video here so people can actually see it.
So I'm actually working on a new video because the last video that I did was in 2022, which is a good one. And it's a 12-minute video, but it's only because I'm trying to capture all the detail. But it's a full-on walkthrough of Disneyland's Pirates of the Caribbean. And again, we tried to replicate it as closely as but it's pretty fantastic. And I call it an immersive experience because when you come through this, you can't help but escape and revert back to that time that you rode the ride. Nice. Children and older individuals, everyone just absolutely loves it. And you always hear the stories. It's like, oh my gosh, I remember when I was, this is my favorite ride. But we literally have converted our entire yard, our garage, our entire courtyard. And it's a very immersive walkthrough experience. And then we try to take all the main scenes from the ride and try to replicate them. And it's all been done just him and I, for the most part. We are the creative force behind it. And
so does it stay up all year? Do you take it down?
No.
So do you convert Pirates
just
of
a couple
the
of bins in the garage. It's just a little bit of stuff that you put away once a year.
No, it's so my partner actually, because now he's retired, he disappeared to go visit his parents for a week. And so we should be taking things down and putting them away. But sometimes it even takes us 3 to 4 months to put everything away just because it's so much. Yeah. And and we're exhausted. We're just tired, but we're very creative individuals. My biggest thing with this is that we love sharing with the kids that come and see it, and explaining that everything you're looking at was handmade. And because the first question we usually get from kids is, where did you buy this?
Where did you buy this stuff?
Where did you buy this? Oh, did you get this from Disney? Oh, do you work for Disney? No. We've made everything. And I've actually been put anything together yet, but we do a lot of time-lapse videos, and I've been doing time-lapse captures of everything from my sketching to the CAD work, to the SketchUp modeling, to the doing the mock-up, to producing this thing, and to the final product. So in the future, I really do hope to have this video because people actually wait in line to see this when it's Halloween season. Just like Disneyland, so that they have something, so they can see the process and they can realize oh my gosh, they literally did everything. Just like this sign back here, we had a photo of the actual sign at the entrance of the ride, and I went into CAD and I traced every letter just because it had to be exactly like Disney. I built the letters in 2 pieces and modeled them in SketchUp, 3D printed them. And it's one of my favorite pieces. And I do a lot of 3D printing, and it's it's so much fun. I just get lost.
How long have you had that 3D printer now? It hasn't been that long, has it? It's
So
5 years, maybe?
yeah, it's just been a few years. I have the Ultimaker 2 Plus, and then I recently acquired the S5, but it's just been actually the S5 has just been a pain in my butt because I just can't. I keep having issues with the print head, but that 2 Plus, that Ultimaker 2 has it just keeps going. It's a workhorse. Nice. I love it. And the only reason I got the S5 is because I wanted the bigger build plate. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Give people an idea of the kinds of things you're modeling in 3D printing though. So like you're talking about the sign and letters and stuff, but you have a lot more kind of.
So I also, so there's the plaque, there's this entry, there's a dedication plaque at the entrance of the ride, right as you're walking in Anaheim at the Pirates, when you're walking in and it kind of splits off and goes upward. At the little water fountain, there's this plaque that's dedicated to the original Imagineers. So I kind of created my own and I 3D printed, again, all the letters. But so I did it I tried to replicate it like the actual sign, but then I dedicated it to myself. Nice. And we call ourselves Pirates for a Cause. We've been raising, we actually have a team with the American Cancer Society, Relay for Life of Corona. And we've been raising funds for the American Cancer Society through this display for the last 2010. So we do this for charity. But so that plaque, I 3D printed. There's a skull that I 3D printed. There's some of the details on the mermaids that I 3D printed. Actually, I love this piece. So this is.
Yeah, cool.
So I 3D printed this, well, at least the base for this. And so the scarab and this portion in here is all 3D printed. And then it's just covered in Swarovski crystals and whatnot.
Cool.
It's a beautiful piece. I again, you can see I love the detail. I love working with these details. But yeah, there's a lot of things that a lot of little things that I've printed. But
and then you have actors like be parts of the display, so that you actually have kind of like this live stage thing going, so that when people go through these different spaces, they're experiencing characters, and it's very cool.
Yep. It's a
friend of the show. I got to put a shout out to Brett, friend of the show, who he was a huge part of that for so long.
Brett used to be our Davy Jones. He used to dress up as Davy Jones. He was amazing. But when he had Owen, their first child, he couldn't participate anymore. So then my brother took over as Davy Jones. So my brother is Davy Jones. One of my nephews was Macus, one of the part of the crew of Davy Jones's ship, but he has also kind of outgrown that. So now we've brought in his successor, my nephew, who's now the young Macus, and then myself. I'm the auctioneer with the wench next to me, and nice. I give out the candy, and but it's a whole family affair. I mean, it's a huge crew. We even do, like, in the background, my sister and my nieces are making homemade beignets. So on Halloween night, we actually set up under our tree, we set up the Blue Bayou. And so we have reservations for VIPs. And so those people come into the Blue Bayou and are served hot cocoa and coffee with freshly made beignets. Cool. And every year people are like, how do I get on the list? How can I get a reservation for next year?
Make a big donation to the Cancer Society.
Absolutely. So it's
cool.
It's just become a community thing and just fun. It's a lot of work. It's a tremendous amount of work, but it's
And how many nights do you do the performances?
We actually only do it. We open the 2 Saturdays before and just Halloween night.
Okay.
Because all the speakers, the iPods, the characters, anything that isn't nailed down and permanent, we actually take it down and put it away. So setup during each night will take anywhere from, depending on the night, could be 1 to 2 hours to set up. And then we take it down at night. And so that's why we don't do it every night. It's a tremendous amount of work, and it takes a lot of people to man it. But my family is amazing. They all live, within so many miles from here. So they're just as much a part of it as my partner and I. And so it's a huge thing.
So cool. So cool.
But next year is Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask, like, when does it switch? Like, because if he got tired of it and then you move to this, when do you get tired of this and move to something else? So
So we
that's
so we take a
you got a
break.
big plan.
Yeah, so we take a break every 4 to 5 years. It just depends. But because I am turning 50 in 2025, I determined that that's when we're doing Nightmare. So next Halloween will be Nightmare Before Christmas.
And what do you do with
No
all this
corpse bride.
stuff? What do you do with all this stuff that, like,
You
I mean,
know,
number one, you got to put it somewhere when you're
Yeah.
not doing this. But now you're actually switching it up, and now
Right.
what?
so this is the part that really, really kind of sucks that my partner retired. So my partner worked in a warehouse, and the original owners of the company knew us and that we were doing this for charity. And so they said,
Mm,
you need to just
You
put everything on a pallet and just
wow.
store everything here for free. And so
Nice.
that's one of the reasons why I had to be strategic about how I design pieces. So I had to design everything to basically break down and fit on a 48-inch pallet. So that's
Hmm.
kind of the geometry. Everything had to fit within a pallet, and it can only be so high. So those are my constraints when designing pieces. But most of it was stored for free at this warehouse because we were doing it for charity. But now that he retired, we lost our free storage. And so we've had a storage unit, and that's where we had our Nightmare stuff, which it's not as big as Pirates. But now that Pirates had to be removed from the warehouse, we had to get a bigger storage unit, and it's really hurting the pocketbook.
Yeah.
It's really expensive. So
Ouch.
I don't know how much longer we'll be able to maintain doing this. And again, we're also getting older, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work for just a couple individuals to do. I will say my brother, major shout out to my brother, he actually took off a week of vacation this year just to help us set up. So
Wow.
between the three of
Nice.
us, and without him, I mean, he's vital. So that's how much of a commitment this is. And it's pretty hardcore. So we'll see. We're all getting older. It's getting harder to build some of these things, and it just takes up a lot of time and resources. But we're still passionate about it. We love it, and it's going towards a good cause. So we'll continue to do it as long as we can.
Yeah, such a cool, like out of normal day-to-day architecture stuff that you guys are doing.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
absolutely incredible. Well, I'm glad you got to tell that part of what I mean, that has nothing to do with that project, and at the same time, like, this is probably
Oh, no,
like
actually-
a piece of your sanity, right?
No. Well, when I was in school, I did do a year of set design, and I was working with a professor there in San Luis Obispo, Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and he reached out to me and he said, Israel, you need to go into set design. What are you doing in architecture? And at that
It'll
point,
lure you away.
yeah. And, this was before my 5th year, going into my 5th year thesis. And I just said, you know what? I just don't want to start over again. I'm just almost done with architecture school. I just need to get out. But he was trying to encourage me to get my MFA because he just saw that I loved doing this. And so a part of me wishes that I had gone into set design, but not really. Just working in Hollywood would
In a way, you still are.
But I am. Exactly.
You
That's
got to
why
do it. You got to do it. all.
that's what I'm doing. I am able to do it. So
And you don't have
Well,
to
I'm not
have
even
anybody
talking about
else
that. I'm
telling
talking
you
about
what to do.
architecture is
Yeah.
set design in its
True.
own right.
that is true. That is true.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us and telling these stories, because it's cool to kind of have this real life. Like, people have been listening to us babble on for a long time, but to have somebody who is like living in the trenches on one project that went for 13 years is just absolutely incredible. Such an amazing achievement to see it through that whole way. And not not walk away from it at some point, because I mean, that happens all the time in architecture, right? So cool. So thank you so much for doing that and coming on here to share that.
No, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you inviting me to be on here. It's been a lot of fun.
And visiting the auditorium at El Rodeo. Definitely.
It'll be easier to get to my house than getting into Beverly Hills. It's just Beverly Hills driving into there is just a challenge.
True. Yeah, I moved out of Southern California. I have no current desire to go visit, but I would go visit for this for sure.
Yeah, oh, you should. You should. It's a lot of fun. And we've been very lucky and fortunate that the Designing Futures Foundation, which is the foundation through HMC Architects, has actually been supporting us the last several years, and so it's become a bigger thing every year, and it's just a lot of people are just incredibly supportive. So we're very grateful
Very
for
cool.
that support.
Nice. Well, thanks, man. Great to see you.
Likewise, thank you.